Welcome to our second Blender training. Today we're going to engage in a workflow that takes us from Magic of Voxel into Blender and into the game engine. When in the game engine, we will actually use a few other tools as well, and I will highlight those in a moment. Starting in Magic of Voxel, we're going to make a base building. It's not going to look like too much of a building. This is more of just a technical training. We want to get some ideas out there to you here today so that you have some good base skills to move forward with. From Magic of Voxel, you're going to export some files. One of the files you're going to export is an OBJ. You're also going to export a PNG. You're going to take a snapshot of a rendering as well. And you're also going to export or save a Vox file, which is the native file for the Magic of Voxel. We're going to take the OBJ file and bring that into Blender. The OBJ actually contains, is actually made of 3 different files: the OBJ file, a PNG file, and an MTL file. You need to make sure that all 3 of those files are together. Always in the same folder. From Blender, we're going to do some work there, and then we're going to export as a Gltf GLB file, and then we'll go through the final parts in the game engine. We'll be using a clean remix for the first time, so Bitly CS1 clean remix, and that will give us a clean project, and I'll show you kind of like what that is in a moment. We're also going to be using for the first time the Nav Mesh Maker, because we're going to make it such that our building can be walked around so that you don't walk through the walls and don't walk through things that are in the building. That's a big part of what we're learning here today as well. And we're also going to check that our model exported from Blender renders and looks good, that you can see it and so forth, and it looks the way it should. By using the Gltf Viewer. So we'll be using all 3 of these. So go ahead and open these in preparation for our workflow. So let's take a look at the top one here, the CS1 Clean Remix. It just looks like a glitch project. Make sure you rename it. I renamed mine to Building Concept. And then give yourself an admin key. And then we'll go ahead and show what this looks like just to give you an idea what I mean by a clean remix. So right here, what you're seeing right here in this clean remix is essentially the same as the other CS1 remix, but without the scene having all of those other things, such as a jukebox. This scene doesn't have any type of ground or any trees or anything laying around. This is very minimal, because at this point in the course, you're expected to start to populate the scene with your own creations. Okay, so that's what we want to start with at this point. So I'm going to close that. What we'll be doing is eventually putting some model files in here for our nav mesh and for our scene model. So that's where they're going to go, right in here in this assets folder. We're also going to use, if we look back at these links, the second link, the Nav Mesh Maker. We're going to use the Nav Mesh Maker, which is this right here, to add the nav mesh, or to create a new model file, which is called a nav mesh, that you don't see, but affects the way that you can walk around in the world. So this is going to be proving to be quite important. And then the other, the last of these web pages that we want to have open is the Gltf Viewer, and that will take you to this page, which we have used before, to just ensure that our file that we export from Blender in fact looks like we expect it to look. Okay, so backing up again to our workflow, we're going to start in Magic of Voxel. We're going to go into Blender eventually, and then into CS1 using a couple different pages in the game engine environment. So your actual project, a Nav Mesh Maker, and we'll be using the viewer just to check our file. Also, in addition, I will show you how to upload your building concept file to Magic of Voxel, and your Blender training files, your Nav Mesh, and your building GLB files into Blender. Blender 2 training, or Blender training 2 files turn in. And then over here, building concept files turn in, so the Magic of Voxels. So we'll be turning in a PNG file up here as well as a Vox file. Down here we'll be turning in a GLB file and a Gltf file. You'll see the extensions on them are slightly different. What we're going to start off with is Magic of Voxel. So let's go Command space and type in MAG to get Magic of Voxel and open it up. With Magic of Voxel open, we're going to continue by getting rid of the current voxels that are in the scene and getting rid of the palette that's over here, because you never want to start with just a palette filled up with junk like this. We're going to get rid of all these by pressing Command A and then the delete key to delete everything. We're going to use the default space of 40, 40, 40, and we are going to get rid of this palette. Before we go any further, I think it's a good time to say that by pressing the Command and then the Tab key, you can always go between different applications. So if I wanted to go back to my browser, I can do that. Command and Tab. Hold the Command key down and tap the Tab key. If you were watching this video, for example, you can use this process to go back and forth between Magic of Voxel or Blender, whatever tool, and the video itself. So I'm going to hold Command, tap the Tab key, and I'll go back to the browser. If you press Command Tab, it'll go back immediately to the last thing that you were at. So that's an important little skill to have and to use, because that will save you a lot of time. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to make 5 different materials in our palette. So let's go down here in the bottom left and click Color. I don't really care what these material colors are, so I'm just going to quickly just grab 5 different colors and put them in the bottom left slots down here. So here we go. There's 3. Here's going to be the 4th color, and then we'll have, this will be my 5th color right here. All right, so I have 5 different colors here in these material slots, and I'll be using them one after the other. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the foundation and exterior of this building by putting this brush in face attach mode. Face brush in attach mode. So face, brush, and attach mode. So let's go ahead and with the face brush in attach mode, we're going to click the bottom. We're going to then use the line attach, and we're going to go around the outside and put a line. We're going to leave 3 spaces along the front side over here somewhere. It doesn't have to be in the same place mine is at. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to go ahead and continue the line. So that's going to be a little opening for a door. Then we're going to continue to close off our space there, actually. There we go. All right, so now we have this. I'm going to press E to rotate a little bit. I'm going to press A to rotate around like that. I'll press E to look down on it. Looks good. I'll press the Q key to rotate around like that. I'll press the A key and the D key. Again, we'll be using the different rotation of the camera buttons with the WASD and E and Q. And then you can also use those same keys with the free camera. The free camera, you can click down here and select the free camera towards the bottom right, and you can press E to go that way with the camera, Q to go that way. You can press W to go in, S to go out. You can press the A key to go this way and the D key to go this way. And I'm pressing the E key again. If you go back to the perspective camera by clicking the PERS, that's perspective. I can center it by clicking the centering button towards the bottom right. Looks like a little half circle with an arrow. Just to review the buttons there for a little bit. Now we're going to go ahead into face attach mode, and we're going to lift this wall up a bit. Something like that will work. I'm going to press the E key and rotate around. So the next thing we're going to do here is I'm going to put it in block attach. I'm going to go block up here, block mode, attach, and I'm going to go and add some blocks right in here to close off my, basically close off the door area. We're going to see something interesting in a moment. I'm going to go click the next material with face attach. I'm going to add a ground, but look what it does at the bottom over here. Face attach, we added the ground, but it caused this little defect, if you will, at the door. So we're going to go over here to face paint. So face paint, and we're going to just paint that edge right over here the same color as the outside. So that's going to be that material. So that does it for us now. Now we finally have our exterior material. We have our floor material. The next material is going to be the third one with face attach. Face attach, this is going to be our interior walls. So go ahead and with face attach, click on the interior walls and go ahead and rotate around so that you can get the front wall as well. So now we have the exterior wall, the floor, and the interior wall. Notice that that composition is very important so that we can customize each of those individually. So it's important to think of the exterior wall, the interior wall, and the floor is definitely being three separate materials. Hence, they have these three different slots down in the palette over here. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add another material. We're going to use block, brush, attach mode. And we're going to add a block over here. And we're going to go to face attach and pull that block up. We're going to go down to the last material with block attach, and we're going to add in front of there, we're going to add like a little wall block. We're going to leave enough space in here, at least 3 or 4 blocks, so that we can walk through it with our character eventually. Now we're going to go over here to face attach, and we're going to pull that. It's going to be kind of like a wall. We're just doing this to illustrate the nav mesh a little bit later on. So now we have some obstacles, and we have a wall, we have a door. So everything is set up just as we need it. I'm going to click center down here in the bottom right. I'm going to also go over to the render section. If you want to add different types of material properties to these material slots, you can. For example, if I wanted to make this yellow block here metal, I can select it and I could click metal, and I can run the metallic value up for it, pretty high maybe, and that gives it a metallic look. If I wanted to make this orange block in the middle here, let's say give off a little bit of light, I can make it emit by clicking emit, and I can run the emission up just a little bit just to give it a little bit of emission. And if I wanted to make the floor glass, I could click on the color of the floor, the material color of the floor, which is this pink color. Then I can click glass, and I can run the index of reflection way up on it. And now we can see those material properties being shown in the way that it's rendering. I'm going to zoom in a little bit as well. Maybe rotate around a little bit to give myself a little more interesting perspective on this. And then I'm going to take a render. Now to take my render, I'm going to go down to the little camera icon down here. I'm going to click the camera icon because it's this rendering that's going to be uploaded into the Google Classroom as the first file that we put in Google Classroom. If you see, I'm waiting for the rendering to actually complete. It's still going up here. Almost done. The little bar is going across. Now it's done. I'm going to click the little camera down here towards the bottom center left. And I'm going to click that. It'll make a little PNG file. I'm going to call this building concept render, building underscore, use underscore, concept, use the underscore, render. I'm going to put that onto my desktop. So desktop. And I'm going to click Save. All right. So now that I have that on my desktop, let's just go ahead and take a look at that right now. So if I go, let's just say, back to my desktop, you'll see that there it is on my desktop. So I can access that and put it into like the Google Classroom if I wanted to. So I could go to the Google Classroom. Magic of Voxel building concept files turn in, and then you will go in and go add or create, and then you'll select file from your computer, and then you'll browse to it. And here's my example I've already uploaded. Here's another example. And then the other file that you need to upload is the actual Vox file, which is the actual Magic of Voxel file. I'll show you how to export that now. So we'll go over here and we'll go back to model view, and we'll go down to the bottom right where it says export and select VOX for Vox. And I'm going to call this building underscore concept. And I'll put that again on the desktop. And I'll click save. It's just showing you that it's there. Let me go back and just show you that it's saved to the desktop. There it is. Building concept.vox. Now I can go back to the Google Classroom and I can click, add or create, file from computer, upload it, and there we would have the Vox file and the image of the rendering. Okay, so that's the first part, the very first part of this workflow. We still have one last step in the first step, and that's to export an OBJ. So let's go to the desktop. Export an OBJ to the desktop, I should say. So let's go export OBJ in the bottom right. Export OBJ. It's going to show up there like that. I'm going to call this building underscore concept. And I'm going to put it on the desktop again. I'm going to save. And I'm going to go ahead and replace. And let's go ahead and see what we got over here. Now I have three files that were created: building concept vox.png, building concept vox.obj, and building concept one that ends basically in MTL. So you want to make sure that you have these three files: one that ends in PNG, one that ends in OBJ, one that ends in MTL. Okay, that's very important. And at this point, let's just practice a little bit of organization. I'm going to right click and make a new folder. I'm going to call this building concept. This is a really good practice to get involved in. So just make a new folder, and then we're going to put the files inside of it essentially. So let's go building underscore concept, and we're going to take all these files that we generated and put them in there. That way we are organized. Okay, now we have that building concept file. Now let's go back and look at what we've done so far. And according to the modeling workflow, we went to Magic of Voxel. We've done the necessary things that we had to do. We got the render, we got our Vox file, and we have just exported OBJ, which is really three files: an OBJ, an MTL, and a PNG. And the next thing we're going to do is go into Blender and bring the OBJ file into Blender. So let's go ahead then, since we don't need Magic of Voxel open any longer, let's go ahead and quit Magic of Voxel. I guess I can skip saving that for now. You can save that for yourself. I have other copies. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go Command Space and type in BLEN for Blender. It's going to open up the Blender application. We're going to go into this second part of the workflow. And we're going to, at this point, get rid of the current box that's in there, the current cube, if you will. We're going to click on it if it's not already highlighted in orange. We're going to press the X key. As a matter of fact, I can show you something else I'm going to make available to you. I'm going to be using the Screencast Keys, which are an add-on that I've added on here, so that you'll be able to see the keys that I'm pressing down in this section of the screen. So like right now, you saw I pressed the N key. You'll also be able to see if I click, like if I left click, you can see I'm left clicking down here because you can see this image that's representing the mouse. If I was using left clicking on the trackpad. It would be done with two finger click, and that would be showing the same thing on that mouse. So I'm going to click the cube right there to highlight it. Then again, so if you look at this picture again, look, I'm clicking off of it. You can tell that I left clicked. Now if I click over on the cube again, you can tell that I am left clicking again to select the cube. I'm going to press the X key, and then I'm going to hit return or click delete, either one, to delete the cube. All right, excellent. So keep looking down here to see what keys I'm pressing. That's interesting, isn't it? All right, so let's go to File, Import, and Wavefront OBJ. And we're going to go to the desktop and go into, we are going to go into the building concept folder and select the OBJ file, the file that ends in OBJ. And there is our building. However, we don't see any colors yet. We need to go to the top right and select the second circle from the right. And that's our dev mode shading. It's a type of viewport shading mode. People normally call it like dev shading. Okay, so I'm going to click on that particular circle and watch what happens. Now we get our colors. All right, so at this point, we can just look around just to appreciate our work. We don't really have to do anything else necessarily in Blender at this point in time, although we could. We could apply some materials for some different colors, but we're not going to go through that right now. We're just going to pretty much use Blender as a conversion tool. Now that we've got our file in here in the proper manner, we're just going to export it with File, Export, File, Export, Gltf right there. It's actually going to be a GLB file. It's GLTF format, but it's in the binary form of it. So let's go over here. And we're going to call this building concept again. Building underscore concept. And put it on the desktop. And a good idea is to always keep all your projects separate and all your assets separate in different folders. I'm going to export that into that folder. I will also save the Blender file in there, which is a good thing to do. I'm going to also just go ahead and save as. So I'm going to save that to the desktop in the building concept folder. I'm going to save that as building underscore concept. Now this does not get turned in. The Blender file does not get turned in. Do not turn in the Blender file. Okay, I'm going to save that. There we go. All right, so now that we have exported our GLB file, our GLTF binary form file from Blender, we're ready for the next step. Let's review what we've done. So we started in Magic of Voxel. We created a little building with a little set of obstacles inside of it. We took a render of it as a PNG. We saved the Vox file. We put both the render and the Vox file in Google Classroom. We also exported an OBJ file, which is really three files, OBJ, MTL, and PNG. We imported the OBJ into Blender, and then we just exported GLTF from Blender in the GLB binary format. The next thing we're going to do is go into the CS1 game engine realm. Before we, as we start that, I should say, on the CS1 game engine side, we're going to go to the viewer. That is the third link right here, the Gltf Viewer. And let's go to it and click Upload. And we'll go to our desktop, building concept, and we're going to select the GLB file, GLB. That's what we're going to be checking to see if it renders. And there it is, it renders fine. You might get a warning down there perhaps. You can just ignore the warnings. So there we go, we got our object, our basic building kind of rendered, and that's all we want to see at this point. We want to make sure that it renders, that we can see it and it looks pretty much like we would expect. Next thing we're going to do is go into our remix. So basically the top link up here, bit.ly CS1 clean remix. We're going to go in there to the assets, and we're going to upload an asset. We're going to upload if we go back into here, I'll show you, we'll upload that GLB file, that same one that we just viewed. So we're going to upload that, and there it is, uploading it. And then we're going to copy that link to the uploaded file. So click on it down here in the assets and click copy to copy the link. Then we're going to go into the Nav Mesh Maker. So if we go over to this presentation, we can see the second link is the Nav Mesh Maker. bit.ly Nav Mesh Maker will take you to this Nav Mesh Maker. We can then hit click in this box and paste in our GLB link, and then hit enter, and then we can get right there, we can see what's going on. Kind of zoom in and out just to see things a little more clearly. So I'm going to turn this down so I can see the nav mesh that gets built. So what I'm going to do is look pretty much from the top view on this to get a better view to understand what the nav mesh is. So we're going to kind of move around. You just got to work with your trackpad, or if you're using a mouse, to get yourself like looking from the top, because we want to see that we have a nav mesh that goes around over here. We can also go over here, perspective top, and that will snap it right to the perfect top. And then I can just drag it over like that. That's another nice way of doing it. That's probably the nicest way of doing it, actually. So we want to pretty much look at our building from the top down, because we want to see that the nav mesh is getting created in the right way. So we're going to go set up for this nav mesh by setting the max slope over here at 0. We'll keep the agent height the way it is. We can keep the cell height the way it is for now. We'll see if we have to change that. We're going to run the agent, we'll keep the agent radius at 0.2 for right now, but we're going to run the cell size way down. Matter of fact, you can run the cell size down the whole way to 0.05. And we're going to check the build to see if it actually builds a decent nav mesh by clicking build in the bottom left. It will try to make a nav mesh based on that. And it made a decent nav mesh, except for the nav mesh does not go. So this area right here, this kind of maybe light bluish color, this is the nav mesh, and even put a nav mesh on top of this obstacle. That's okay, it's not going to hurt anything. But this is the area that it's saying we can walk in. I want it to also say we can walk between these walls. So to make that workable, I'm going to reduce the radius just a little bit to maybe 0.18. If I would have made this farther apart, which I probably should have made this wall farther from this block or whatever, then I would have been fine. But I'm just going to drop it a little bit. I don't want to make the agent radius too small, otherwise it won't be as good. I'm going to click build. Hopefully I will have a pathway through it then. No, it looks like I have to make it even smaller. Let's see if I get it down to 0.15 and I build it. There it goes. That's all I need. All I need is a little pathway through those two obstacles. Now I got it. Because if you saw what I had before, so if I go back to 0.2, which it was before, and I click build, look what happens. It does not complete this little area in between these two obstacles. So I brought it down to 0.18, and I tried it, and it still didn't get a pathway through this little passageway. So I brought it down further, the whole way to 0.15. Again, if you just space things out a little bit further, it would be better. I'm not going to go back and redo that for this example, but I'm going to click build, and now I got a pathway. So this is my nav mesh, basically. This particular thing here that's kind of bluish. You're wondering what this is. You can see it on the top over here as well. So if I kind of rotate this around, I'm going to change this to perspective view. So if I rotate this around, you'll see that it literally has see how it's up there? So you can see it has another part of the nav mesh is kind of like on top of that section. That's okay. I'm not, I would typically maybe pop it into Blender and delete this part. But that's all right. I'm not going to complain about that. So I basically have a nav mesh that allows my character to walk all around the inside of this building, and not through the walls, not through the, these particular obstacles and so forth. So next thing we do is we click export. Export, it will export the nav mesh file, navmesh.gltf. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in my assets. So over here in the assets, I'm going to drag and drop the nav mesh. So now that nav mesh is loading in. Now we have the nav mesh and the building. So now that we have the nav mesh and the building GLB, we can turn those in. But even before that, we'll go ahead and get them into the game. And then after we get them in the game, then we'll jump back into the Blender Training 2 file turn in. This is what we'll do after. Turn in the GLB for the building, and then the GLTF for the nav mesh. All right, so let's go into the, let's maybe get the nav mesh first, I guess. Or no, let's get the building first. Get the building first, copy the link for the building, click on the building, again, copy the link. We're gonna go into the public HTML folder. So this is the first time I'm asking you to really go into these folders over here. So in the actual project, we're going into the public HTML folder, index.html. We're going to go down here. We're going to see that there's a section for the scene model and the nav mesh. We're going to have to type in the scene model ourselves. We're going to uncomment the nav mesh by going like this and getting rid of these comment characters and these comment characters. So now the nav mesh is uncommented. We're going to paste in our link right there. Oh, that's not the link. That's the link for the building. Good thing I caught myself. I copied the building first. So how do we do that? Let me do that. So the building is going to be an GLTF model type of primitive with an SRC equal to, in double quotes, what we just grabbed right there. So our scene model is going to be used an GLTF model primitive, and we pass in the SRC property, and there we have that particular model. We could have even done the nav mesh that way too, but I wanted to show you the difference between using a primitive that has the GLTF model inside of it as a component, and then using a component. In other words, having a component that has a GLTF model, I should say having an entity, a generic entity that has a GLTF model component versus having a GLTF model primitive, which this is a specialized primitive right here. This is more generic primitive. So right here, I use a generic entity with the ID nav mesh. I have this already set up for you. And here we go. So I'm going to go ahead then and just look at this in the game for a second without the nav mesh so you can see what the difference is. I'll be able to walk through the walls. And then I want to maybe change the way I'm positioned a little bit depending on where I come into the game. So I'm going to go over here and open in a new window. I should be inside of that building after I get in eventually once it loads up. Yep. I'm going to go to submit. There we go. So the size of my building is a little too small. I'm also going to run the scale up by 2. So you can see the building is a little too small and I can walk through the walls. So let's look at what we have here so far. We have the building, but it's obviously too small for the character size. I'm going to actually bring it up 2.5 times, 2.5 times. Yeah. I could even go as far as 3 times larger. Yeah, let's just say 1. What the heck? I'll go 3 times larger. So I shouldn't be able to walk through walls like this unless I was maybe a ghost or something. So that's what our nav mesh is going to be for. So we're also going to scale this first before I do anything else. Let's go here, and what we'll do is right before the source. Let's go ahead and go there and hit enter, and then move up with our arrow key, and we'll type in scale, and we're going to say scale equals, and inside of double quotes 3 space 3 space 3. That will scale the model by 3 in all dimensions, and then we'll let it refresh, and we'll log in and we'll check it out. Oh, that's much better. So that's, I'm kind of like inside a wall, so I'm going to change that. That's much better. It is a little tight fit there still, but there's the front door and stuff. Yeah, so that works quite fine. So 3 is a good scaling. So scale it by 3, that's good. And we got this kind of narrow passageway, but we'll be able to get through that. So I can walk through the walls now, which I don't want to be able to. So there's the problem that we're going to fix with the nav mesh. So right now the scale problem is fixed, but we still have to fix the nav mesh. We still need to add a nav mesh, and we also need another thing. We also need to change the position. So I'm not going to spawn. I was almost in a wall there. I don't know if you noticed. Let me refresh this so you can kind of tell. I'm a little bit, yeah. So take a look. I'm going to move over 1 in the X direction. So if you look right here, I'm not going to move. See how I'm kind of like right against that wall, almost in it? I want to move a little bit over this way. So I'm going to add, I'm going to move in the X direction by 1. So we're going to go back to the index.html file, go in front of the scale, hit enter, go up, type in position equals, and we're going to put 1 for the X direction, and then we'll just keep 0 for the other 2. All right, so this will give me that, move me over by 1, so I'm not as close to that wall as I was. Or did I go the wrong way? Let me see, hold on, wait. I'm inside the thing now. Oh, I went the wrong way. I should have went -1 direction. Whoa. I should have went -1. Wow. So that's okay. But that's good that I did that. Now, if I go -1, hopefully now I am not inside that wall. So it looks like now I'm good. Yeah. So now I'm over here. If I turn around to my side, yeah, I'm not hitting into that wall. Okay. So that's great. And I got the obstacles. The only problem now, so I'm positioned okay. The sizes of the scales are okay. Except now I can still walk through the walls, which I don't want to be able to do, right? I want to eliminate that bug. I want to get rid of that bug. I want to make it sure. So over here on the side, looks like I have an issue with the log screen. I can just move the log screen out over here. I can just grab it. That's not going to be a problem. The log screen, again, you don't have to have log screens in your game eventually, but they're useful for other things rather than just logging errors and learning how to code. You can probably think of some things off the bat that they would be good for. All right, so let's go ahead and get this nav mesh set up. Okay, so how do we do that? So we're going to go to the assets, and we're going to get the link to it. So let's click on the nav mesh that we put in there, click copy, and then go to the index.html file again, back into the public index.html, and inside the URL section of the nav mesh, we're going to go ahead and paste that link. Now we have to add scale 3, and we need to add the positioning the same as the other one too, otherwise it won't work. So the scale and position need to be the same as the scene model. So the scale needs to be 3, just like the scene model. We also need to have it positioned the same, so it has to be -1 for the X value. So make sure that we position it the same as our scene model, and make sure that we also scale it the same as our scene model, otherwise the nav mesh won't work properly. All right, so that being said, we leave everything else as it is. Now let's go see if our nav mesh works. Here we go. Exciting times are these. All right, let's go click, and let's go see if we can walk through the world without, oh, something's happening here. Hold it. I'm walking through the walls. I don't want to walk through the walls. So what is up with that? So what we will typically do in this case is to check the Y value of the nav mesh, and sometimes we have to adjust that. So to adjust the Y value of the nav mesh, so these things do not just come out perfect the first time, as you will see. They might, it's a chance, but many times not. First thing we can check is press Option Command J. Option Command J opens up the console to see if we had any error. Okay, that looks fine. Fetch event, respond with, that's all good. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. And just one more time, just to make it clear that I'm going to refresh this again, just to show you that I can walk through the walls. And that's not what I want. So there we go. I can still walk through the walls, and I don't want to be able to do that. So let's, first of all, make our nav mesh visible, but we'll do it in the inspector. So we're going to learn how to use the inspector. You're going to press Control, Option I. Control Option I opens up the inspector, and then we're going to zoom out a little bit here in the inspector, and we're going to look down from the top. You can also remember we were actually using the inspector the other time before, and you didn't know that. So I'm going to go to maybe I'll just keep the perspective view for right now. But so we want to look down in here to see the nav mesh, but currently it's set to invisible. So over here where the nav mesh is, we're going to click on it to make it visible. Okay, that looks okay. Actually, that does look not bad at all. So we might just want to raise the player up a little bit then, because the player is initially maybe a little bit too low for this. So sometimes we might have to bump the player up. So let's go look at the player height. So the player is currently at a height of, if you remember, the Y position for the player is 0. That's what we had it set at. But it looks like because the inside of the house, because the inside of the building, I should say, because the inside of the building is higher up than the ground outside, that's what seems to be causing the problem. So if I go click on the player over here, we can see the position is still 0. I can test this in the inspector. If I want to bring this up to say 0.2 for the height for the player, and see if that grabs onto the nav mesh, I can do that. So I can go back to the scene. I changed the Y position of the player. I selected the player over here on the left, changed this Y position over here on the right to 0.2. I'm going to go back to the scene. Now if I go back inside, will it grab onto the nav mesh now? No, not yet. Maybe it's still a little bit too high up. So this is another one of those. It looks like it may have grabbed on. Actually, it may have grabbed onto the nav mesh in the wrong spot. Let me go back to inspect the scene, and let's click on where the player is at. Let's go click on. So we're already on the player, and we can see the player is currently, should be highlighted over here. Click on the player. So player's right there, and we can select the tool up here. I can click this tool. This is the translate tool. So this tool up here is the translate tool. I can grab onto this arrow and move the player like right inside for right now, and zoom in. And I am going to lift the player up even a little bit higher to maybe 0.43. Let me see, go click back on the player. Yeah, 0.43 approximately. I'm going to go back in the scene and see if that grabs onto the nav mesh at that point. So here I am. And now I'm going to go ahead and try to get this set up. Let me see, hold on, I'm getting the same basic effect. Let me see what's happening here. I'm going to go Option Command J in the console. So this is part of this process. Okay, cannot read, remove attribute of null. So raycaster or cursor opponent. To the whitelist. Okay. So over here, there is an error. that is starting with this particular part of the code, and it's dealing with this idea of a raycaster, and that's something that's used under the scene in the game engine. So I am going to go ahead and close out this tab because that's not something that you should have to worry about. I am going to bounce the model, or actually I can leave the model and the nav mesh where it is, and I can change the position of the player when it starts. So how would I do that? If I want to lift the player up, I can go down here in the index HTML, and here is the player. This actually gives me the player. So inside of the player opening tag, we're going to type in position equals, and we're going to put in 0, and let's go ahead. Oh, now I realize why that it was. I was changing the position of the scene before, not the player. So that's why I was getting the directions off, because relative to the player, it's the opposite. So I'm going to bring this up to a height of 0.5 for the Y, and then 0 for the Z. So 0, 0.50 for the player. And let's go see what that does. Let's go show that. And now we have a nav mesh that works. Look at that, 0.5 is a good, that's good, because it seemed like before, it's still a little bit too, maybe the door is still a little bit too small, but the nav mesh works fine with that particular height. So 0.5 worked good for a height for me. I can go between the walls. I cannot run into the wall. Or I can run into it, but I can't go through it. So that's working just the way we want. It's definitely not, doesn't have the art design that we want for, you know, some finished product, but this is a technical training. Okay, great. So I definitely would make the door bigger. Definitely would, you know, make a real looking house. But this shows you how to make a nav mesh, shows you how to get some obstacles and, you know, prove that we can walk up to the walls but not through them. We can walk up to the obstacles and not through them. So that's yeah, that's a perfect example of what we want to do for our Blender training 2 with this creating this building concept. So you want to go back to your Google Classroom, turn in your GLB file, and turn in your Gltf Nav Mesh file. So I can go ahead then and do that as an example. I'm going to turn mine in, and by editing it, I'm not a student obviously, but I'm going to go upload these for you to see perhaps. So I'm going to go File, you will click Add or Create File from your computer, and then I can do it different ways. I can go to the desktop building concept. So here's the GLB file. Right? And then I can add also the GLTF file for the nav mesh, because that's what I have to do, turn in the GLB file. Then I also have to turn in the nav mesh, which should be in my downloads, right? There it is, nav mesh. Boom. Now I've uploaded what I turned in, what I have to. Well, I have to save it. Well, you have to click turn in and so forth. Your interface is a little bit different because you're a student, of course. But yeah, here's the building concept GLB file, then the GLTF nav mesh file, exactly as we should have for this training. I wish you the best, and I look forward to our next training.